Hello, this is Romeo Cat Computers, and I have a lot of old AV equipment. Now you've read the title of the video, so I'm sure you know what I'm going to do here. I'm mainly interested in pulling out the crystal resonators. You know, those 2-pin crystals that I've made radios with over the years. But there's a lot of other components that I don't already have a convenient source to get. So let's see what I can find. So here are all the boards that I was able to harvest out of the AV equipment. Now, as you saw, I had about 5 DVD/tape players, but I also threw in a few other things, notably 2 Dish Network DVRs. So let's see what we got before I harvest them. This right here came from a video CD player, which I did not show, but also didn't work. And there's a crystal right there. Where is it? Right there. This also came out of the video CD player. It's a little closed RF modulator. It turns out that that thing was actually for PAL countries on 50 Hertz. So this could possibly be used as a PAL rather than NTSC RF modulator. Here is the power supply board out of, I forget which one. This transformer is from the 50 Hertz machine. Here we have one of the VCRs. These RF modulator modules, they're my favorite parts of taking them apart because they usually have the most crystals and radio related things. But like there's a variable capacitor and there's potentiometers. I like getting those. There's a crystal. Here we've got this one, which doesn't really have a whole lot on it, but it's got the power supply board, and I like taking parts out of that. This doesn't have a whole lot on it, but there are some crystals. Here's the power supply board out of one of the other devices, and it's got power supply stuff. And another power supply board. And here's a DVD board, and it does have a few crystals. And finally, another VCR board. Got an enclosed power supply, but it's also got a RF modulator, and there's a crystal right there. Also on the Dish Network boards, there's quite a few things. Now, if you ever find a DVR on the side of the road, or you can get one for cheap, you should get it because not only do they have the good parts in them, but they also have hard drives, usually a half a terabyte. And I was able to get some hard drives out of these. But anyway, there's a few tall and short 2-pin crystals. And there's a bunch of RF modulator modules. And a bunch of big old capacitors, which I won't be taking. But a lot of big power supply components. And this board here is pretty much identical. So let's see what pile of goodies I can get out of these boards. So here are the results of my pillaging. Some of these boards were a bit difficult to work with, and I don't have desoldering braid or a solder sucker or really anything that you'd want to actually desolder stuff with. So I probably could have grabbed more components if I had those things. And especially on some of the boards like the dish boards, the solder that was already on there was very difficult to get heated up to the right temperature. But nonetheless, I still got a lot of good components out of it. So starting up here, we have these things. Now, I should probably know what this is, but I don't. They're not the power transformers, because those were clearly completely separate components. However, this does look like 2 inductors that are bonded together with a iron core. So I'm guessing this is probably a 1-to-1 transformer for filtering purposes, maybe. Anyway, these were fairly easy to pull off since they only had 4 conductors. So this pretty much represents everything I took apart, minus 1 or 2. This right here is a choke. And again, I also would have grabbed more of these, but the dish boards were pretty hard to desolder from. These were found on nearly all of the power supplies, some sort of a disc capacitor. I don't know the value, and I think they actually serve a different purpose, but they're also pretty easy to pull off. Now these were pretty nice. I found them on nearly every power supply board. And these are 2 kilo ohm, 2 watt resistors. And they're made out of ceramic, I think. Very hard material. So if I ever need high power resistors, here they are. And speaking of resistors, here's some variable ones. And these are 2 potentiometers I managed to pull off. I haven't measured the values yet, so I don't know what they are, but I pulled similar ones off, and they're usually around like 5 to 10K. Now the thing I was most excited about trying to get out of these boards was the crystals. And as you can see, I pulled off quite a few. I've ordered them into columns based on their frequencies. These are my favorites, the 3.579.545 megahertz crystals. And these are of course found on the NTSC color burst part of composite video circuits, because that is the bandwidth that the color burst is allowed. Here's a really nice one. It's wrapped in some sort of heat shrink that has the labeling on it. These ones are my 4 megahertz crystals, and I found all of these in the RF modulators. Well, I have a whole bunch of brand new ones, so I didn't bother to pull out all of them, but I got 2. These ones are 14.31818, which is right in the 20 meter band. And so I might be able to make some sort of transmitter based around this frequency in the future. And then these 4 I pulled out of the dish boards. These 2 are 48 megahertz, and these are 54, which aren't terribly useful for ham radio frequencies or really any shortwave frequencies, but they are nice to have. And then these are all the ones that the markings aren't very clear on what frequency they are, so they're miscellaneous. And I went through all of the CD and DVD and Blu-ray players. Well, there's only one Blu-ray player. And I took out all the laser diodes. Hopefully I didn't damage them. Took out all the little focusing glass thingies because they look kind of neat. But if you see right there, I took out a bunch of, I think they're neodymium magnets, but I took out some strong magnets. And here's some miscellaneous larger components I got. I got 2 12-volt fans. This one up here appears to just have the standard red and black. This one's got a bunch of extra conductors, so I'll have to figure that out. And then I got 2 transformers. This one has a whole bunch of pins on it, and I actually broke one of them off. So I might just harvest this for the magnet wire. And this one came out of the PAL European 220 50 Hertz machine. So this probably wouldn't be quite as useful for a step down here in North America, although it probably wouldn't make all that much of a difference. But again, I could probably harvest it for the iron core and the magnet wire. The 2 other things I got were out of the Dish Network boxes. Yep, I managed to pry these Broadcom processors off the boards. They use that blob solder method of soldering them on. I basically had to smack them with hammers until the chips popped off. And so these are totally useless, especially since they're system on a chip and proprietary and all of that. But they look pretty cool, so I'll put them in my processor collection.